Good morning, good evening, whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever you might be doing. We wish to welcome you to the Silverlight Show. The Silverlight shines to illuminate that which lies hidden in darkness. For those of you tuning in today, we welcome you in. Genesis chapter 41. A little bit long, but definitely worth it. We're going to see Joseph becoming basically Pharaoh's right-hand man. And the introduction of the events, well, we already introduced it, but the real kickoff of the events that lead into Exodus, because we're not far away from there now. But no matter what, let's get into the text. Genesis chapter 41. After 2 years' time, Pharaoh dreamed that he was standing by the Nile, when out of the Nile there came up 7 cows, handsome and sturdy, and they grazed in the reed grass. But presently 7 other cows came up from the Nile close behind them, ugly and gaunt, and stood beside the cows on the bank of the Nile. And the ugly, gaunt cows ate up the 7 handsome, sturdy cows, and Pharaoh awoke. He fell asleep and dreamed a second time. 7 ears of grain, solid and healthy, grew on a single stalk. But close behind them sprouted 7 ears, thin and scorched by the east wind. And the thin ears swallowed up the 7 solid and full ears. Then Pharaoh awoke. It was a dream. Next morning his spirit was agitated, and he sent for all the magicians of Egypt and all its wise men. And Pharaoh told them his dreams, but none could interpret them for Pharaoh. The chief cupbearer then spoke up and said to Pharaoh, I must make mention today of my offenses. Once Pharaoh was angry with his servant and placed me in custody in the house of the chief steward, together with the chief baker. We had dreams the same night, he and I, each of us a dream with a meaning of its own. A Hebrew youth was there with us, a servant of the chief steward. And when we told him our dreams, he interpreted them for us, telling each of us the meaning of his dream. And as he interpreted for us, so it came to pass. I was restored to my post, the other was impaled. Thereupon Pharaoh sent for Joseph, and he was rushed from the dungeon. He had his hair cut and changed his clothes, and appeared before Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, I have had a dream, but no one can interpret it. Now I have heard it said of you, that for you to hear a dream is to tell its meaning. And Joseph answered Pharaoh, saying, Not I. God will see to Pharaoh's welfare. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, In my dream I was standing on the bank of the Nile, when out of the Nile came up 7 sturdy and well-formed cows, and grazed in the reed grass. Presently there followed them 7 other cows, scrawny, ill-formed, and emaciated. Never had I seen their likes for ugliness in all the land of Egypt. And the 7 lean and ugly cows ate up the first 7 cows, the sturdy ones. But when they had consumed them, one could not tell that they had consumed them, for they looked just as bad as before, and I awoke. In my other dream I saw 7 ears of grain, full and healthy, growing on a single stalk. But right behind them sprouted 7 ears, shriveled, thin, and scorched by the east wind. And the thin ears swallowed the 7 healthy ears. I have told my magicians, but none has an explanation for me. And Joseph said to Pharaoh, Pharaoh's dreams are one and the same. God has told Pharaoh what he is about to do. The 7 healthy cows are 7 years, and the 7 healthy ears are 7 years. It is the same dream. The 7 lean and ugly cows that followed are 7 years, as there are also 7 empty ears scorched by the east wind. They are 7 years of famine. It is just as I have told Pharaoh. God has revealed to Pharaoh what he is about to do. Immediately ahead are 7 years of great abundance in the land of Egypt. After them will come 7 years of famine, and all the abundance in the land of Egypt will be forgotten. As the land is ravaged by famine, no trace of the abundance shall be left in the land because of the famine thereafter, for it will be very severe. As for Pharaoh having the same dream twice, it means that the matter has been determined by God, and that God will soon carry it out. Accordingly, let Pharaoh find a man of discernment and wisdom, and set him over the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh take steps to appoint overseers over the land, and organize the land of Egypt in the 7 years of plenty. Let all the food of the good years that are coming to be gathered, and let the grain be collected under Pharaoh's authority as food to be stored in the cities. Let that food be a reserve for the land for the 7 years of famine which will come upon the land of Egypt, so the land may not perish in the famine. This plan pleased Pharaoh and all of his courtiers. And Pharaoh said to his courtiers, "Could we find another like him, a man who is in the Spirit of God?" So Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Since God has made all of this known to you, there is none so discerning and wise as you. You shall be in charge of my court, and by your command shall my people be directed. Only with respect to the throne shall I be superior to you." Pharaoh further said to Joseph, "See, I put you in charge of all of the land of Egypt." And removing his signet ring from his hand, Pharaoh put it on Joseph's hand, and he had him dressed in robes of fine linen, and put a gold chain about his neck. He had him ride about in the chariot of his second in command, and they cried before him, "Abrek." Thus he placed him over all the land of Egypt. Pharaoh said to Joseph, "I am Pharaoh, yet without you no one shall lift up hand or foot in all the land of Egypt." Pharaoh then gave Joseph the name of Zaphenath-Paneah, and he gave for him a wife, Asenath, daughter of Potipharah, priest of On. Thus Joseph emerged in charge of the land of Egypt. Joseph was 30 years old when he entered the service of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. Leaving Pharaoh's presence, Joseph traveled through all the land of Egypt. During the 7 years of plenty, the land produced in abundance, and he gathered all the grain of the 7 years that the land of Egypt was enjoying, and he stored the grain in the cities. He put in each city the grain of the fields around it. So Joseph collected produce in very large quantity, like the sands of the sea, until he ceased to measure it, for it could not be measured. Before the years of famine came, Joseph became the father of 2 sons, whom Asenath, daughter of Potipharah, priest of On, bore to him. Joseph named the firstborn Manasseh, meaning God has made me forget completely my hardship and my parental home. And the second he named Ephraim, meaning God has made me fertile in the land of my affliction. The 7 years of abundance in the land of Egypt enjoyed came to an end, and then the 7 years of famine set in, just as Joseph had foretold. There was famine in all lands, but throughout the land of Egypt there was bread. And when the land of Egypt felt the hunger, the people cried out to Pharaoh for bread. And Pharaoh said to all the Egyptians, "Go to Joseph, whatever he tells you, you shall do." Accordingly, when famine came severe in the land of Egypt, Jacob laid open all that was within, and rationed out grain to the Egyptians. The famine, however, spread out over the whole world. So all the world came to Joseph to Egypt to procure rations, for the famine had become severe throughout the world. Real interesting turn of events. Now, the cupbearer, who, if you recall, Joseph foretold his life would be spared, took 2 years to remember that this great guy was down there and helped him out. I think that's more for dramatic purpose, but then it's emphasized in the Bible by saying Joseph had to have a shave and wash and put on fresh clothes, which does give the image that it's been some time. Maybe not quite as long as 2 years, but he was already down there before the Pharaoh's servants arrived, and then he was also let out pretty quickly. I've said before, Joseph is not a slave. He has been manumitted. He's been made a free man. And this is why it's very easy for Pharaoh to turn around and say, "Hey, this guy, he's my number 2. Listen to him." With a slave, that's kind of difficult. It has happened, has historical precedent, but in Egypt in particular, they tend to promote people in the same family lanes. And even though Joseph was technically an alien, he was not an Egyptian, he had served with Potiphar. And from that, he kind of gets an honorary Egyptian citizenship. Again, the idea of being an honorary citizen is not something new. It's been around for a long time. The Romans did it. The Egyptians did it. I'm sure if we go back further, the Sumerians and Akkadians would have done it. But there's no process here. It's already happened that Joseph has become a servant instead of a slave. So for Pharaoh to push him one further, he's still a servant of Pharaoh. He's still got an overlord, someone he has to go to for approval. But Pharaoh's telling him, no, I'm just going to do the royal stuff. You can look after the daily work stuff, which is a pretty good deal for Pharaoh when you think about it. He gets the throne. He gets everybody's adulation. As we know, the ancient Egyptian pharaohs were worshipped to a certain extent, definitely in a symbolic way. And in return, Joseph does all the little jobs. Now, Joseph turns out to be a pretty capable administrator. Everywhere he goes, he's capable of putting stuff together. But his dreams are still the province of the divine. He doesn't claim any responsibility for it. He always says, nope, I'm not interpreting your dream, it's God. Whereas in the future and in the past, people would presume to act on God's behalf and say, yes, I will interpret your dream. And Joseph is plain when he comes out and says, yeah, not me. I'm getting this from on high. So maybe he's telling people about his dreams, looking for that exact same spirit. He's kind of testing others. No matter what, we have the 7 years of plenty and the 7 years of famine. Egypt was known in ancient times as the breadbasket of the world. The problem is when we look back 2, 3, 4,000 years, the Fertile Crescent is actually a fertile crescent. Right now it's a lot of desert and wasteland and stuff, and that's just simply because it was farmed to death and the climate changed. And as the climate changed, the farmers couldn't keep up because they didn't have the same access to technology that we do. So when a river dried up, you had to move on. Well, if you notice, in the present day, Egypt kind of, wherever the Nile is, that's where Egypt is. Everything else around it is pretty much desert. In ancient times, the Nile would have had more water coming through it, simply because Africa has become very, what's a good way to say this? Very dry. The Sahara Desert keeps growing, and that's due to a whole lot of factors. This may change in the future, but for the last couple thousand years, it's been the truth. Egypt being that breadbasket is something that is testified to time and time again. Augustus, Caesar, goes in and conquers Egypt just so that he will always have enough bread to be able to feed his people. And the Romans do this exact same practice of putting food aside. And there's many, many references to a Caesar, or imperator, granting grain to the populace, which is probably just getting rid of the old stuff because they're getting new stuff in. Like Joseph, it's kind of civil planning. But right here, this is the first real mention of it that we know of. And yeah, so we started off with Joseph being a slave 2 chapters ago, being sold into slavery by his brothers, and it ends up where basically the world is Joseph's slave. However, they're still saying he is chosen by God. It's still recognized that all of Abraham's direct descendants are still favored by God. Whether you're an Egyptian, whether you're whoever you are, he still has that aura about him. It's not defined what it is, but these people know divine works when they get it. The Egyptians were notoriously prone to worshiping multiple gods. But they recognize that Joseph has a special relationship with his God, and they're willing to accommodate it because, it's another god. Join the pantheon. Get on up there, put your household god up there. What do you mean it's not a household god? It's what? He's everywhere? Okay, we'll deal with that later. Fix the problem. It's a very abstract concept to the Egyptians. They don't understand it like they do their own gods, but they do recognize it is a belief structure that they can absolutely live with. It's kind of like the difference between an atheist and a theist. If you believe in God versus somebody who doesn't, that would be like somebody who believes in many gods versus somebody who believes in one. The series Battlestar Galactica actually hinted around that a whole lot of times, where the Cylons believe in one god and the humans believe in many, and the conflicts that they had over that ideology. And it is a real conflict because it's kind of one or the other. There's three stages. You believe in many gods, you believe in one god, you believe in no gods. But in this case, Joseph is just too darn useful to be, persecuting him or anything, because what he says comes true. And in his mid-30s, he's ruling over Egypt. He's got a wife. He's got kids. He's pretty happy with his place in life. So, we're going to leave it there, because next chapter it gets more complicated. The Bible is more interesting than half the literature we have today. But anyways, we hope you enjoyed this episode of the Silverlight Show. If you did, please hit like, share, subscribe. Buy the books in the link down below. For 99 cents, less than the cost of a cup of coffee per day, you can have one of our ebooks. And for $10, less than a price of a cup of coffee for every day of the week, you can have one of our printed books, something that you can treasure and save for a long period of time. Reach out to us at Silverlight Live on Twitter. That's at Silverlight Live, all one word, all lowercase. And no matter what, we hope you have a fantastic day.